Hello and welcome to the EduTalk series hosted by Biotone EduPartners, and massage industry experts. With the challenges facing massage schools, students, and practicing therapists during COVID-19, the EduTalk series supports the new norm of virtual learning by connecting you with industry experts who will share their knowledge and expertise on topics not only to discuss in class, but most importantly, for career success. Tonight's expert is Dr. Susan Salvo, who with over 35 years of professional experience is an author, researcher, explorer, perpetual student, and instructor at Louisiana Institute of Massage Therapy, where students have nicknamed her the Yoda of Massage. Most recently, Susan worked with the FSMTB, the Federation of State Massage Therapy Boards, in writing guidelines for COVID-19. Susan is ready to present quick, effective documentation methods for clinical, wellness, and private practice settings, allowing you, the therapist, more time to focus on client care. Following Susan's talk tonight, Susan will provide attendees with intake forms, consent forms, and progress notes. So please watch your in-basket for these to arrive. And with that, I turn over the talk to Susan and look forward to your speaking. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Danelle. I also want to thank everyone for attending. I know this is an odd time to be sitting at your computer, but hopefully by the end of the talk, you'll find that this can be well worth it. So tonight, the topic is going to be essential documentation, and we're going to be answering questions about what those essential documents are, a little bit about how to maintain them, how often to update them, how to destroy them, and how to release them. So let's start with what are the essential documentation that we need for our clients. And there are basically three documents that you need. The first thing that you need is you need an intake form. Some people call it a health questionnaire. The second thing that you need is an informed consent form. Now, some people combine those into one form. Some people have them as two separate forms. I've even seen some states say that those two documents are combined in what they call the initial consultation documents. So just to kind of give you a feel for, some states do group those into one type of document. But the third type of document that you need is a session note or a treatment plan or progress notes. And these have several different terms, but they serve the same purpose, which is basically to paint a picture of the session, to describe what happened with the interaction between you and the client. So those are the three essential documentation. So the first one's going to be the intake form or health questionnaire. The second thing is or health assessment, and that probably is a better term to use because that's really what you're doing. You're using what I call a self-report form for the client to disclose information about him or herself. Now, so what kind of information do you need? Well, first of all, you need some personal contact information for sure. Usually that's the first part of the document. The second part is a little bit about their medical surgical history, and then you're going to be asking them things about contraindications, and you're also going to be asking about, I like to ask about past massage history and preferences. All those can be put into a form. And what type of form that you use, whether it's a digital format or a paper format, is really going to be entirely up to your preference, or it's going to be determined by either the massage establishment or the clinic where you work. So personally, I prefer paper documents. I know sometimes people call me a dinosaur, and that's okay. But I just like the feel of paper. And I think if you look at the research, actually, there's less errors on paper in terms of client input as opposed to the digital format. So I tend to be paper, but I also scan my documents and then upload them digitally. Now, how do you maintain these documents? So most people agree that you want to use what's called the double lock rule. So what does that mean? So if you're using paper documents, what that means is you want to hide them behind two locks. An example could be a locked fireproof file cabinet behind a locked office door. So that would be an example about the two lock rule. For digital formats, you have a couple different options here. You either need to password protect your device, and usually it's a tablet, but it can be a computer. And you also want to either password protect the firewall, like if you have a storage, I use a terabyte, or you can use a cloud. So whatever source that you use, just be sure that it's behind 2 locks. And another question you might ask is, how often do you update these? And this is a very good question because there are different answers according to which document you're talking about. So let's talk about the health questionnaire or the intake form first. Usually you want to update that form when something in the client changes. So he may have a health change, difference, it may have a new health condition, a new symptomology, something along those lines. He may move to relocate. So that would obviously mean another intake form. Now, if you're like me and your health doesn't change that much so far, knock on wood, then you would do it annually. In fact, you may have been to the doctor this calendar year and all of a sudden they say, oh, we're purging all of our documents. We want you to go ahead and create a full new set of documents. So you're having to sit down and recreate those initial documents. So once again, so when you're talking about the health questionnaire, the client intake form, you're talking about doing it when something in the client changes, or you're talking about doing it annually. Now, what about the informed consent document? Well, you update that when something in the treatment changes. Now, that could be something with you as a practitioner. You've gotten new training in ISTEM, which is instrument-assisted soft tissue mobilization. You may have gotten new training in cupping therapy or something along those lines, or hot stone therapy. And so why you have to modify your informed consent document is because now there's going to be a whole new set of risk versus benefits or side effects that they have to be under consideration. So if you're doing things like cupping, you want to talk about the marks that could be left on the skin. If you're doing something like ASTEM, you want to talk about the rash or the petechial rash that could form. If you're talking about hot stone therapy, you have to talk about the potential of burning. So again, all these are risks that you have to disclose to the client whenever you add on a new type of treatment. Or it can also be, let's say you've changed products. Because remember, the session, the informed consent is not just about the procedure, but it's also about products you're using. So let's say you're using Biotone products and you start using the CBD oil or their products. You want to be sure that you disclose to the client that you're changing products, and that usually you get them to approve the ingredient list. And Biotone for sure has, I want to say it's called the product data sheet, I believe it's what it's called, where you can go online and Biotone and pull down their ingredient list and disclose that to the client, which I would recommend that you do, or any kind of product that you're using. It doesn't have to be Biotone products. And just get them to okay the product list to be sure that you've cleared them for possible allergens. And also, this is kind of an interesting aside, you can also disclose to them about laundry detergents that you're using. So like if there's several percentage of the population who are allergic to like Tide or Gain or those kind of things, you want to disclose the products you're using to clean. So that's when you would update the informed consent document. Now, what about the treatment notes? So those are updated every time you do a session. So for instance, if you're doing a massage today, then you would obviously produce a session note, and you see them in a week from week from now, you would also create a new session note or a new progress note or a treatment plan for that particular session. And sometimes it might be repeating the treatment you did a week ago, but still those things need to be documented. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at my notes for just a second. Oh yeah, so when can you release them to a third party? You want to have, some of the documents we're going to be emailing you after the session are going to be including some examples of what these are going to look like. You may have your own, and I would highly recommend that you take a look at the documents that Biotone are going to be sending you and just see if they need to be updated, because this is a thing that happens when we kind of get attached to a certain document. All of a sudden, we kind of become snowblind to it, and they do need to be looked at for possible revision over time, because things do change. So when can you release them is only through written, not verbal consent from your client. So there's going to be a client release form or document release form in the documents that we're going to be sending you after the talk. And if the client is a minor or declared incompetent by a judge, in the case of certain cognitive decline disorders, then it has to be a legal guardian, and that legal guardian is usually appointed to that person by a judge. So those are when you can release information to a third party. Now, why is documentation important at all? Documentation is important for a lot of reasons. First of all, it gives evidence of the actions you performed and why you performed it. It is considered the gold standard in legal evidence. And I'll hopefully have time to tell you a couple different stories where evidence helped a case, and documentation helped a case and documentation hurt a case, or lack of documentation hurt a case when there was litigation involving a massage. So I cannot stress to you strongly enough that everything needs to be documented that you do, and why you did those. We'll talk about documenting formats in a second for the session notes in particular. And also many people are going to be reading these. Your boss could be reading these, obviously an attorney, an expert witness could be reading these. So you want to also, it has to make sense to a variety of different people. So make sure your session notes are easy to follow, they flow, they're not full of assumptions or non-factual information, and that you're having to provide good solid evidence for the documents that you're trying to produce. How long should you keep these documents? This is going to be state determined, but I will say, so you need to be able to know what your state law is. And but in general, the NCBTMB, the National Certification Board for Therapeutic Massage and Body Work, recommends at a bare minimum 4 years from the last date of service is when you destroy those documents. Now, if you're using paper, obviously the best method, or one of the best methods, is to just shred the documents. If you're using a digital drive, what they recommend is actually destroying the hard drive. And I had a friend of mine who is a psychologist, and he had to destroy his computer because he went to a new computer. All the files were moved over, but it still kind of leaves a blueprint on the hard drive. So he actually had to take a drill and drill holes into the hard drive to be sure that nothing could be taken off of that computer. And be careful where you dispose of these too. You just want to throw your laptop in the trash can because, like I said, this data, especially if it has client data, can be retrieved. So keep those things in mind. So, oh yeah, and so another question is there a penalty for not documenting? Most states do have a mandate stating that you must keep documentation on your on each client. And I know that in my state, I was actually, during inspections, I had to produce evidence that I kept client documents. And I do know there was a Facebook group, I was preparing for this lecture, and I call it casting a net to the sea of knowledge. I cast a net to a couple of Facebook groups and said, give me some C questions. And one of them was so interesting. She actually one lady talked about a situation in Texas where there was a pretty hefty fine, over $2,000, for not keeping documentation on clients. So just realize that this will not only help you provide better client care, but also helps you in case there's any kind of litigation, and it's also mandated by state regulatory boards such as massage therapy, state licensing boards. So I'm going to talk a little bit about something that I use. I know that there's many different formats out there. SOAP is one of them, FDAR is one of them, API is one of them, Care Notes are one of them. And so you got to get to pick and choose unless it's mandated for you by your employer or where you work. But what I started using is FDAR. My first book is in its 6th edition. And about the 3rd edition, I started looking around, and I wanted to make sure that what we were using was equivalent to what healthcare providers were using. And I called the different nursing schools and medical schools, and pretty much they were starting to move to what's called the FDAR format. And so I started looking at it a little more closely and really kind of fell in love with it. And even though I will give you some blank forms to use, you can definitely Google, and I would highly recommend this. Google articles on FDAR, articles on SOAP, articles on these other formats, and kind of choose the one that works best for you. One of the things I was always kind of bothered with SOAP notes is, even though many people learned in massage school, many people were getting out of massage school and not doing it. So, and so you want to have a format that works well in multiple practice settings, which I think FDAR does really, really well. It works with not only clinical settings, but it works in wellness settings, and spa settings, and private practice settings. So what does FDAR mean? And I want to go ahead and share a screen with you in just a second. And almost there. This would be probably easier for me to show. Can you see that, Danelle?
No, I don't see it.
Okay, give me one more second.
And then.
Okay, what about now? Share screen. Okay, I've clicked on share screen and nothing's popping up. Danelle?
I am, it would be on your, where you opened your documents earlier.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, how's that?
That's that.
Yay, okay. So what you see here is FDAR notes, and you can see at the top there's a place for your client name and then a place for your name. And then what you do here where it says date and time, and I'm going to show you, I'll fill that one in just a second. You're going to actually put the date and the time that you started the session. And what they recommend is military time. So like if it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it will be 13. So then the focus of the session would be the second column, and that is basically why the client is there, why the interaction between you and the client. And most of the time it's a pain, or it can be improved function, or it can be reducing stress. And what I've added, and you don't have to do this, what I've added is I added a numeric scale of 0 to 10. And where you see D stands for data, and A stands for action, and R stands for response. So if you look under data, this would be both subjective and objective data. And so you want to put things like here, things that the client said, things that you're observing are the objective data. In this particular format, you can either circle pain or stress. And then if you look at the uppercase term, you see before the massage. So the client would determine the stress level or the pain level, if depending on why they're there, on a scale from 0 to 10. And what the A would be is what you did to address the client's purpose or focus for the session. So let's say it is pain reduction for a headache, then you would get the client to talk about what the pain level is before the massage, keeping in mind the time frame. And then the action would be performed a massage on back, neck, and shoulders, applied heat for 10 minutes, trigger point work to the suboccipitals, upper traps, whatever you decide to do in that session, and that would be in your action. The action session is also where you would chart things like if the action was a referral to another service provider, if it was home care techniques, self-care techniques, this is where you would put the actions, any action that you would use to address the client's focus. And then the R would be the response. So how did the client react to your actions or respond to your actions? So basically, what is their pain level at the end of the massage? But also want you to notice on the side where it says time, this is when you're going to chart when you took that information. So if it was a 30-minute session, you started at 10 o'clock in the morning, then you would chart the response about 10:30. If it was an hour session, you would begin the session at 10 and you would chart the response about 11. And I'll show you that information next. So this would be one that is filled out. So of course we put John Doe, the generic anonymous name, and Mary Smith, another anonymous name. And this one we dated for 119, and we started the session at 10 o'clock. The focus of this particular client was reduction of pain from a tension headache. And if you notice under the D, under data, and again, this is subject and object data, we circled pain. And at that point, this particular client, John Doe, said his pain was about a 7 on a 10-point scale, 10-point pain scale. And so, and then this particular therapist also put a little bit of client's verbal self-report, which is client reports dull pain at left temple and base of skull bilaterally. And notice the line drawn to the end. And what this does is it helps protect the therapist from someone coming in later and adding to the note. So if you look under the action, this is what Mary did to address John's focus, which is the reduction of pain from tension headache. And again, these should be verbs, action verbs. So they massage with emphasis on upper back, shoulders, posterior neck, and suboccipital regions of the head. Heat applied to the posterior neck for 10 minutes. And again, notice that line 2 drawn at the bottom. Now also look in the column where you see time again in that first column. This was an hour session, so at 11 o'clock, the client was reassessed, and right now their pain was at a 3. And it's really important, if you can, to also chart remarks made by the client, statements made by the client. And of course, you always want to use quotation marks. So in this case, Mary put down, client states, "I feel much better," and then also put the line there. Now, what you're seeing here is one that's already generated, already made, and you're just filling it out. If you look, the next session would be at the bottom. And then so when they returned, then you could put in information about the new session, and if the focus is the same or if it's changed, and then more about, you just repeat it. You can add in information about the pain level or the stress level before and then after. But one thing I like about this, when I'm going to go back to the D part, there's been a huge emphasis on evidence-informed practice. So your data actually is a lot of subjective and objective data. And I won't go into what those things are, because you all either have in massage school or been through massage school, you know what these things are. But this is also a great place to put in scientific evidence. So, because they're also data that help you inform your actions. So, so what you might want to do for a tension headache is you might want to go back and start doing some research bits on massage and its effects on tension headaches. And if you look at the evidence closely, usually in the methods section, it will tell you where they worked, how often they worked, how long they worked, and the duration of the sessions, if it was 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and that would help inform your action as well. And then in the response section, if you're using things like evidence, you can also put down projected goals or recommendations for follow-up. So let's say you found a research by John and Taylor, and you found out that they did a 30-minute session on back, neck, and shoulders using trigger point work and PNF or MET, muscle energy techniques. And they were 30-minute sessions done once a week for 6 weeks. Then you could actually put that down as a follow-up in the R section, the response section, saying, and I recommended this type of frequency, this type of duration to help fulfill the client's goals. So it really does kind of open up things, and you can see it's a very easy flow format. And everything still revolves around the client's goal. Now, sometimes the client will request a certain amount of pressure or a certain type of draping, and all of those could actually be put in the D section for subjective data. But some people argue that is also important for the client focus. So you got some kind of wiggle room where you want to put things like client requests. And but this is a format that you can do, but I want to show you one other form.
Susan, I'd like to just mention we are at 7:25.
Woo, mercy. Okay, this is the last thing I want to show. Oh my gosh, this is time flies when you're having fun. But this is, but I want to show you this one because the other one was just obviously a generated form like this, which is one of the forms we're going to give you. This last form is something that a lot of therapists do. They take the intake form, it's already filled out, and during the interview part, they flip it over and they just create this grid. And so it's going to be 2 vertical lines, 1 horizontal lines. You write in date and time. You start putting this information down, but it's all handwritten. So you can do this on a blank piece of paper, and it's really easy to collect all the data that you need. Okay, so that pretty much winds it up. I just wanted to get people thinking about documentation. Oh, I'm going to tell you about the 2 cases real quick. Okay, so in one case I worked on, it was at a resort, and the client, and I was working for the defense attorney at that point, or the defense. And the client come in for a massage and stated that his pain level in his neck was an 8. And when he left, he stated that it was a 5. But later on, a day later, he said his pain was worse. And there's a lot of things that went into that case. This is just one thing. But because the client took great documentation, I was able to say in my expert report, looking at the evidence, that you were already at an 8 when you got there. And clearly the massage, you said, you were at a 5 whenever you left. So that was factored into my expert report. Another case where poor documentation hurt a case was the therapist did not take an intake form. All he had was a session note. And he misspelled her name, which is interesting. It was not dated, which hurt his case. So we don't know when that report was generated, and or how long the session was, or what he did. But he also put in his treatment notes that the client's condition was chronic. And in her deposition, she said it was not chronic, it was acute because, quote, I woke up with a stiff neck. So that's another thing, and it hurt him because the client was never able to get, and according in his documentation, the self-report or this client's narrative, which was an important piece of the case, and that was totally just not part of what he did. So I just kind of want to give you an example of how the pre and post scales can help you in your defense, and not taking an intake form can hurt you in your defense. So I just think it kind of helps to tie things together when you're looking at it from a legal standpoint. But this concludes my lecture for today. And I know it's kind of brief, but I just want to get your cerebral juices flowing, thinking about this, and also reevaluating your forms, and hopefully get you recommitted. I know you're already recommitted to client care, and using documentation as a wonderful tool to collect data, to chart your observations, even with COVID-19. Oh my goodness. When you're asking clients about their signs and symptoms of COVID-19, have you been, all this is going to be recorded in the D under subjective. If you're pulling out a thermometer and you're taking their temperature, that's going to be recorded under objective data. So all this ties into the kind of world we live in today, and is very relevant, and more relevant than ever, to the kind of service that we're providing to our clients.
Susan, why don't we close out the screen share?
Oh, good idea.
Sorry. There you are.
I was on a roll.
And are you at a stopping point right now?
Yes, ma'am, I sure am. So
okay.
Casey got a question, I think.
Well, I noticed some chats came in. I don't know if you see those. Do you see those from?
I do not. Let me see if I can chat. I see 4. Let's go ahead and can we get Casey talking first? I think, can you unmute her?
All right. Why don't you share your contact information with the audience, so that if they have questions on what they're hearing tonight, that.
Oh, sure. Okay, so, oh, hey, Timothy. Oh yeah, okay, so how can we share our forms? Yeah, so one of the forms I'm going to give you is one, it's going to be an intake form that's more culturally competent. Thank you for bringing that up, Timothy. So I'm going to be basically asking you for preferred pronouns and preferred names if it's different than their birth name. We still have to get a birth name if you're doing things like insurance work or clinic work, but definitely you do want to ask for their preferred name and preferred pronoun, and use it when you're communicating with the client. Absolutely, definitely. Thank you. And lovely content presented clearly. Oh, thank you, Casey. Appreciate it. Glad you liked it. Virtual kiss. So, okay. So manual safety data sheet. Thank you very much. That's the proper term. Awesome. And that's what, Michael? I don't think that's right. I think that's. I think it's supposed to be product safety data sheet.
Material safety data sheet.
Or material. Thank you. Materials. Safety data sheet. Perfect. Okay, awesome. And that might be a fun follow-up for you, Danielle. I'll give you some homework to do. So any other questions?
Now, if people want to contact you after tonight's EduTalk, and I know we'll be emailing your contact information out, but they might want to jot it down.
Oh, yeah.
What's the best way for folks to follow up with you?
Okay, my email address is Susan Salvo, my name in lowercase, at hotmail.com, Susan Salvo at hotmail.com. I have a blog. You can just use the contact feature to the blog. My blog is massagepassport.com, massagepassport.com. And yeah, and definitely when I give you the forms, they're your gift. You can share them. You can hoard them. You can do whatever you want to with them. They're yours to use and to enjoy. So, and there are many. Like I'll give you probably 7 types of intake forms. And again, look at them and kind of find your favorite. I'll give you several FDAR forms, several SOAP forms, and there'll be more than just that. There'll be a couple of other forms for you to look at as well.
Well, that's great, Susan. Thank you so much. And in closing, I'd like to, we will be emailing a link to this recorded EduTalk tonight. We'll be sending that out in the next couple of days, along with Susan's follow-up email as well with the forms she's discussed this evening. Now, please mark your calendars. We have 2 more great talks in August, August 11th, with Melinda Nye. Listen to your body with your hands. She's a cranial sacral therapist associated with the Upledger Institute. And on August 18th, this will be a great one with Cherie Sonnen Mo on how to kickstart your marketing while still in school and starting out. So we will be sending out invitations again for this. And we have a great lineup for September. So please continue to join us in the Edu series.
Okay, I'm going to be back in end of next month with Nathan Nordstrom. We're going to do a co-event on COVID-19 and hypercoagulability and assessments for hypercoagulability, and it's going to be kind of fun. And I really want to thank you, Danelle, and Biotone, and I want to thank everyone that attended for your continued commitment to professionalism. And thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any last questions to chat, Susan, before we close out tonight?
That's a question for you.
At this point in time, the Edu series do not count as CEs, but stay tuned. Anything can happen. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciate you attending. I appreciate Susan's talk this evening, and all the Edu Talks are also archived at biotone.com/edu-talks in case you missed the July 21st talk, and Susan's talk will be posted this week. Thank you, and be well and stay safe, everyone. Good night.